Now, I do want to pick you gentlemen's brain on one of the things that we hear get brought up very often. In fact, I got to be very clear here, Gary. I probably hear it get brought up more often than anything else on the issue of the canon. Now, and the reason I want to pick your brains because it is something that I want. We'll have it on video, and people can come and they can look at the whole video. They can be edified, God willing. At Trent, was it left open-ended that maybe in 2050, 2095, another book will be added to the canon, Gary? Will they maybe find a jar? They'll open up the jar. They'll find some early church father writings, and then boom, maybe a book that they had not considered, and the church is going to add that to the canon later on, because we're told that the church passed over certain books in silence. So the canon is open. Can we talk maybe about books passed over in silence? And is it possible, Gary, that we're going to have the gospel of some kind of guy we've never heard before added to the canon later?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I touch on that, though, I just want to piggyback on a great point that you made earlier about with equal piety and affection.
Yeah.
The minority in the council is a small minority of theologians that kept trying to push for some sort of qualification. They actually petitioned that the words be changed to similar piety and affection. And as Judd notes, that the manifest will of the majority voted against it. So, so again, you have these council fathers who keep bringing things up, but frankly, it was just an impossibility. Yeah. Okay, so actually, David gave a really good explanation before we went live on the show.
Great.
We were talking about that, and it's basically there is a basically disputed points. While they wanted to frame the final decree, the people who are writing the decree pose certain questions to the fathers as to, do you want the decree to have this? Do you not want it to have that? What you want to do. And it's within that context that this question came up. So David, maybe if you wouldn't mind, you could explain like what exactly was going on with the point in question.
Sure. As you correctly introduced this, the fathers made some observations also, and they were wondering what else they should clear up. And as you both know, the Vulgate is something different than the canon. The Vulgate was not necessarily representing what was held as inspired by the Catholic Church. So some fathers saw this and made these observations that books like, Prayer of Manasseh or 3 Maccabees, they were also sometimes in the Vulgate and some manuscripts during the history. So they wanted to clarify whether should we make a note of this in the decree, that these books aren't inspired, aren't canonical, or we just left it like it is without mentioning even these books in the decree. So the 14th point of the Capita Dubitationum was whether the so-called apocryphal books that are usually included in all the Vulgate codices of the Bible with the sacred books are to be nominatim rejected by this decree or to be silently omitted. So if you look at the question itself, it already clarifies that we're talking about the Vulgate. We're not talking about the canon. This question is not related to the canon at all. It is related to the Vulgate. So the fathers wanted to make a point that, look, we sometimes see these books in the Vulgates. Should we put this in the decree that these books that you see in the history, sometimes in the Vulgate, should be nominatim rejected in the decree because we don't accept them as inspired? But unfortunately, some of the people confuse what this passing over of some books in silence means. They think that they are passing over books of which the canonical status was not certain, or that possibly the fathers left it open for a future council to decide, which is not the case. They are already saying these are apocryphal, and the question is raised only due to their presence in the Vulgate. That's all. And it has nothing to do with the inspiration of these books, because the fathers already knew that these books are not inspired.
Yeah, so what you have is a disputed point whether to explicitly reject these books or not mention it at all. And they vote not mention it at all. So the only thing you have is you don't have an explicit rejection at the council. But that's not to say it's an affirmation, right? It's nothing, right? It's like silence. Silence always cuts both ways. And so, like David said, they already stipulated what the canonical books are, and which are inspired and can be used to confirm dogma. Whether or not there's an explicit rejection, it really doesn't matter, right? And like I said, I think the reason the Council Fathers did that was because they were aware that some separated brethren, in the Orthodoxy, some of them are using these books in liturgy. And so maybe if there was an explicit rejection in the council, that could be an obstacle for reunion. And so my own personal opinion, none of this is in the Acts or in the diaries or letters, but just looking at the questions and thinking it through, it seems to me that, yeah, and they would be going beyond their authority to explicitly reject these books, because previous councils and papal decrees, there really isn't a pedigree for them. So for all practical means, there's no way these books could become canonical. They just don't have the pedigree of canonical books. Does that make sense, William? I mean, it is kind of technical, but...
Yeah, no, it really does make a lot of sense, Gary. And by the way, for the audience who're tuning in, we hope you're being edified. We have a good crowd watching. If y'all do have any questions, feel free to send them right now. If you have anything pertaining to what we're talking about today, it really does make sense, Gary. And I think it's really important to make those technical distinctions, because if we don't, I think it can be very confusing to the audience. And I really liked how a little while ago you emphasized the particular language utilized at Trent, because I think we run into a number of problems, gentlemen, if we walk around with the idea that, well, 2050, 2075, or anywhere down the line, they're going to begin just, adding books that maybe you'd never heard of before to the canon. Trent really wasn't defining anything. But I think the language is very, very clear there.